Now guys, after covering the rights, we will come on to duties of the bailor. Right, let's start with duties of the bailor. Now this topic also would be a longer one, right? So let us very quickly shift on to the list of duties of the bailor. So here we discuss rights, now we'll be discussing duties of the bailor. Duties of the bailor. So now bailor, as we all know, is the person who is giving the goods. He has certain duties. So let's discuss one by one the duties of the bailor. The first duty that falls on the bailor's part is as per section 150 para 1. Now section 151 para 1, what does it discuss about? It discusses about, see, para 1 and para 2 are very much linked. They discuss about disclosure of faults. So I'll just write disclosure of faults. Why we need to have two paragraphs in place, that also we'll try and understand. But para 1, keep in mind well that this is linked to only gratuitous bailments. Gratuitous bailment. There is no reward attached over here. It's not the category what we call the non-gratuitous, where there is a reward attached. So now para 1 applies only to gratuitous bailments. So what does it say? What does section 150 para 1 say? That the bailor must disclose or should disclose all known faults. We'll come to this term, known faults. Right. The bailor should disclose all known faults. That one thing we need to keep in mind. What kind of faults? The one which materially affect materially interfere with the use of the product, right? So one thing we know, that the bailor should disclose all known faults, and the one which what kind of faults? The one which materially interfere with the use of the goods, or which expose the bailee to a higher level of risk or danger. So now what we try to understand over here, right? Let's put a case example in place. Let us say Mr. Sir has a horse, right? He gives this horse to his friend Mr. Ansh, right? Ansh wanted the horse, so Sir gives him horse, gratuitous bailment. I have not given it on hire. The horse is vicious, right? The horse is not a normal one. So I'll write over here, horse is vicious. right? And sir is not aware, right? So we'll break this condition down into two parts: when sir is aware, when sir is not aware about the same. Now let us say the horse is vicious and sir did not knew about it, so I'll put it under condition 1, or what I love to call situation 1, right? Situation 1: does not know about the horse being vicious, right? Maybe I've newly purchased the horse, I have no clue that the horse is vicious. I give it to my friend Ansh for riding it. Ansh is injured, obviously. Ansh is injured. So in this case, when I do not know about it, am I liable? The answer is clear cut. No, sir is not liable. Sir is not liable. Now let us pull out situation number 2 over here. Situation number 2. Sir has a knowledge about the horse being vicious. He gives it to Ansh. Still he gives it to Ansh without disclosing it. And Ansh gets injured. Is Sir liable? The answer is a clear cut yes. Right. So now if we try to break this down, the gratuitous bailment thing. One thing, whatever you know, the facts should be disclosed. Should disclose all known faults, right? Which will materially interfere with the use of goods, right? So over here, sir should have disclosed the faults. But let us say if sir does not know, how on earth will he disclose it, right? एक तो फ्री का काम करो, किसी को घोड़ा दो ऊपर से, you take the liability, one thing that you don't know, and second you are giving it for free, still you would be made liable. No, that's not at all the case. You are not liable in such a case, right? But if you had the knowledge and purposefully gave it without disclosing it, then if any injury is caused to the bailee by usage of such goods, then the bailor is liable to compensate the bailee for the same. Now guys, we clearly understood as to what section 50 para 1 wants to say regarding the disclosure of faults in case of only and only gratuitous bailment. Remember good that it's only and only for gratuitous bailment and not for non-gratuitous bailment, right? So there are two outcomes. One, you need to disclose. In case if you haven't, right, because you did not have knowledge, you are not liable. If you had knowledge, still didn't disclose, you are liable. Now let us go on to section 150 para 2 for this matter. Now section 150 para 2, based on pretty similar lines. Now we have section 150 para 2 coming into picture. Section 150 para 2, same thing, disclosure of faults, but in this case it is non-gratuitous that we are talking about, yani for reward. Right. So in this case, if it is a case of non-gratuitous bailment, do you think the liability of the bailor goes a little high, the duty of the bailor goes a little high? The answer is yes. Let us check this out with the help of an example. Let us take up an example over here. Example is pretty simple, guys. Now example we would be discussing over here, let us say there's one Mr. Ayush, right? He goes after his marriage on a honeymoon with Mrs. Ayush, right? So we'll put some X over here, right? So Miss X now turns Mrs. Ayush, and over here, sir is the hotel owner, right? And we are a very lavish hotel providing services to our clients, such as very expensive rooms, buffets, and stuff. Apart from that, we also provide an special arrangement, an arrangement of a boat for a dinner, candlelight dinner, right? I should be seriously happy listening to this very romantic visit that he is going to take with his wife. Now, coming to this part, so over here we are providing hotel, boat service, and other stuff, right? On hire. So it is a clear cut case of non-gratuitous bailment when we are giving the boat again is refers to goods over here. That's why I've taken this example, right? It's a wonderful classic case wherein the name of the case, if I recollect clearly, it is Reed versus Dean. I'll just write it over here. Reed versus Dean, right? So in this case, so this guy takes the boat and is off for a romantic dinner, the small lake nearby the hotel, right? Now what happens? The boat catches fire, right, due to engine issue. So there is some issue in the engine due to which the boat catches fire, right? So over here the boat catches fire and Ayush jumps into the water. Ayush's wife also jumps into the water, right? Now over here, can Ayush file a suit? Now let us again put whether I know it or not know it. That's very, very important. So let us say sir does not know about the fault and sir knows about the fault. Let us answer the easier one first. Knows about the fault, is sir liable? Yes, my firm is very much liable. Let us say sir does not know about it. Then I recollect this statement, wonderful statement made by a judge when I was reading the judgment. It says that the bailor is not supposed to be an insurer for every eventuality, but the thing is very, very clear. He said, when you are receiving some benefit in the contract of bailment, then it is expected that you take more care than usual, right? So if you do not know, it is negligence on your part and you would be still liable. Very, very logical. When you're making money out of stuff, at least we expect some bit of more carefulness on, as if I may like to say that, on the part of the bailor. So in case of non-gratuitous bailment, if I say, in this case, whether the bailor does not know or knows, he would be held liable for non-disclosure of faults, right? So that's pretty clear. So over here, if he knows and still does not disclose, oh my god, very criminal minded chap, which I am not. Trust me, I promise that I didn't know about it, but still, would I be held liable? Yes, obviously, if I do not know, how on earth will I disclose it? So uh, I've been that good chap who does not know about the fault, and obviously that's why I haven't disclosed. But am I liable? Yes, I'm still liable in that case. So that sums up our section 150 para 1 and 2 regarding the disclosure of faults in the goods bailed by the bailor. Right now, moving a little ahead, we go on to the next part. We have 2 points done, so we'll be doing section 158. So section 158 discusses about expenses. To get rid of this keyboard somehow, right? Section 158. Right. Again, 158 is broken down into two parts, the gratuitous part and the non-gratuitous part, as we saw in section 150. So first let me write what it constitutes of. It talks about expenses. Right. So section 158 talking about expenses. Now, expenses can be divided into two categories, not gratuitous, non-gratuitous. It is divided into two categories. Then we'll put gratuitous and non-gratuitous in place. First, let us put divisions to expenses. Necessary and extraordinary. Right. So we have two categories of expenses. One is the necessary expenses. The second category is termed as the extraordinary expenses. Right. Now, how do we go about putting this in the gratuitous, non-gratuitous category? Now let us take 158 para 1 for that matter. Now, that is the gratuitous case. First case we'll take gratuitous. Gratuitous bailment. Right. So in case of gratuitous bailment, what kind of expenses has to be borne? Necessary, extraordinary, or both? Right? Or none? Let us check this out by means of an example. Right? And then we'll write a note on this one. Let us say Mr. Ansh has a dog. He loves his dog. He gives his dog to his neighbor, obviously not permanently. Right? So he gives his dog to Mr. Ayush for a period of 15 days. So Ansh is going out on some foreign trip for 15 days, so no one is there at home to take care of the dog. So he gives it to his friend Mr. Ayush. The dog obviously has a lot of tantrums and has an expense of food and upkeep. Pull back Mr. Ayush by ₹1,000 a day. Oh, this guy is really expensive, trust me. Now, so Ayush had spent 15,000 bucks on the dog, and after Mr. Ansh turns up, my question is very simple. Can Mr. Ayush claim for 15,000 rupees, that is food and upkeep of the dog, for a period of say 15 days, right, as was given in the case? The answer is very much a yes, right? The answer is a yes, right? So over here we understand one thing very, very clearly. These are necessary expenses and it is a case of gratuitous bailment, so necessary expenses can be claimed, right? Second thing, if I would like to put across, is let us say there was a medical expenditure on the dog. Medical expenses, right, of ₹5,000. That is extraordinary expense, something which is not contemplated in the course of things. So over here, how much Mr. Ayush can claim? Mr. Ayush can claim 15,000 plus 5,000, a total of 20,000. So one thing that we learn in case of gratuitous bailment, just a second. The Bailor needs to compensate the Bailee for necessary as well as extraordinary expenses. Right. So one thing is very clear, that necessary and extraordinary expenses both can be claimed. Now, going on to the second part, the non-gratuitous part, which I'm more concerned about. It seems very logical, the gratuitous part. Right. So now coming to the non-gratuitous bailment part. If I take the same case very quickly, there is one Mr. Ansh, right? He went to Ayush, one Mr. Ayush, who was running a kennel club. डॉग्स के लिए हॉस्टल चला रहे हैं, ठीक है, एंड द चार्जेस आर से ₹750 per day if you are willing to keep the dog in their hostel, right? So Mr. Ansh is going out for a 15-day foreign visit. So he turns up to Mr. Ayush and says that I want to keep my dog over here. So Mr. Ayush says it's 750 rupees a day that they are charging. So accordingly, Mr. Ansh has to pay. So Mr. Ansh is liable to pay how much? Pay 11,250, I think so. Right? So Mr. Ansh has to pay 11,250 rupees over here to Mr. Ayush. Right? Fair enough. Let us say Mr. Ayush had no clue about the appetite of the dog. This guy is real hungry. So 1,000 into 15 is the food and upkeep charges that the dog demands from Mr. Ayush. So 15,000 kharch ho gaya Mr. Ayush ka. So Mr. Ayush wants to claim this extra rupees. So let us say 15,000 minus 11,215. भाई कितना हो गया, राइट? यहाँ हो गया हमारा 3,750 rupees. So फूड एंड अपकीप के लिए 3,750 का लॉस हो गया था आयुष को. आयुष वांट्स टू क्लेम इट. कैन आयुष क्लेम इट? द आंसर इज अ बिग नो. Ayush cannot claim this amount. The reason is because when you are doing a bailment for reward, this is nothing but non-gratuitous bailment, is nothing but bailment for reward. Bailment for reward, right? So when you are doing a bailment for reward, then no claim can be entertained for any kind of necessary expenses. Food and upkeep is necessary expenses. So over here, he cannot claim anything beyond 11,250, which is the reward or the charges over here, right? Agar, obviously, if the dog would have ate less and had a lesser maintenance expenditure for 15 days, let us say 100 rupees a day, then Ayush would have made a killing. Obviously, he would have spent only 100 rupees into 15 days, that is 1,500 bucks, and he would have made a lot of profit. He wouldn't have given it to Ansh, right? So it is contemplated that all necessary expenditure are automatically incorporated in case of non-gratuitous bailment. But what about the extraordinary, guys? That was very logical. Let us say there was a medical expenses attached, right? So put medical expenses. That dog ate too much, so ऊपर हो गया ₹5,000 of medical charges. So what all Mr. Ayush can claim over here? Can he claim for this extraordinary expenses? The answer is yes, right? So in case of non-gratuitous bailment, no claim can be made for necessary expenses, extraordinary expenses can be claimed, right? So keep this well in mind. Why you cannot claim for the necessary expenses? Because it's already incorporated, it's understood that it is incorporated in the charges of bailment. Extraordinary expenses can be claimed. So total amount that Mr. Ansh has to pay to Ayush is 1150. कहाँ चला गया भाई? यहाँ 1150, sorry, 11,250, sorry, and plus 5,000, that is a total of 16,250. अगर चार्जेस का 11,250 एंड मेडिकल एक्सपेंसेस का 5,000 दोनों मिला दिया तो 16,250 कैन बी क्लेम्ड मैक्स. उससे ज्यादा क्लेम नहीं हो पाएगा. द एक्चुअल एक्सपेंडिचर विल नॉट कम इनटू पिक्चर. सो दैट इज a wonderful case of necessary and extraordinary expenses that we have understood, right? So coming to this part, non-gratuitous part that we have learned, right? That is bailment for reward. Only extraordinary expenses above and beyond the charges can be claimed, and no necessary expenses can be claimed for, and the logic is pretty sound. Now going after 158, going to section 164. 164 talks about defective title. So we'll do section 164. 164 talks about defective title, right? Some page adjustment that we are done with. Going to section 164. So what does the defective title thing say? First of all, right, if the bailee suffers a loss or a detriment due to the defective title of the bailor, then the bailor is bound to compensate the bailee for such loss. चलिए, तो यहाँ अपन बहुत एक इजी सा एग्जांपल लेकर आगे बढ़ते हैं. Let us take an example over here. Let us say there is one Mr. Gautam, ठीक है, he gave his car to one Mr. Sir, ठीक है, मुझे कार दे दी उन्होंने, right? But Gautam is not the true owner of the car. The true owner of the car is Gautam's dad. So Gautam's dad is the true owner of the car. Without his consent, without his knowledge, right, Gautam gave his dad's car to Sir, right? So Sir तो आराम से निकल गया गाड़ी लेकर. Later on, Gautam's dad found Sir on the road, stopped the car, pulled out Sir, beat him in black and blue, because he is unaware what his son has done, right? and filed a suit on me, and I had to pay damages. So sir had to pay damages, right? Now, can sir claim this damages amount from Gautam, right? The answer is yes. Who is Gautam over here? Let us try to figure it out. Gautam is what we call Bailor without title. So Gautam is Bailor without title. और हमने ऊपर अभी जस्ट क्या स्टेटमेंट में लिखा भाई, पढ़ो ध्यान से. If the Bailee suffers a loss, जो मैंने किया, due to the defective title of the Bailor, the so-called Mr. Bailor, Mr. Gautam had a defective title. So due to defective title of Bailor, then the Bailor, so-called without title, is bound to compensate the Bailee, right? So in case of defective title, the Bailor without title is bound to compensate the Bailee for any loss suffered due to such defective title, right? तो ये हो गया हमारा section 164, right? So that gets us sorted with section 164. Section 164 regarding defective title. Now going on to section 159 that we've done long back, हजारों साल पहले किया था, right? Premature termination. In case of gratuitous bailment, some effort to search this, but I'll do that. So if you recollect, in case of gratuitous bailment, the bailor can prematurely terminate the contract before the due date, but if the bailee has suffered any loss beyond the benefit so derived from such bailment, the bailor is bound to compensate. चलो, ये हमने राइट्स में किया था, मैंने बताया था कि आई विल टेल यू ड्यूटीज आल्सो ओवर देयर. ये देखो यही सामने केस मिल गया, कोई मेहनत ही नहीं लगी, राइट? तो अगर आप थोड़ा याद करने की ट्राई करो तो आई विल ब्रिंग इट इन पर्सपेक्टिव, राइट? ये साइकिल ली थी, राइट? कॉस्ट ऑफ रिपेयर्स for sir was how much? 900. When the bailor is prematurely terminating the contract, then he needs to compensate the bailee for any detriment incurred beyond the benefit so derived, right? तो rental expenses that I could have borne, जो मुझे free में मिला, right? That was 750. So net amount to be paid by the bailor to the bailee was 150. If my benefit is more, obviously it was gratuitous bailment, so I needn't pay. So that was section 159, the duty of the bailor to compensate the bailee in case of premature termination of gratuitous bailment. That is section 159. Now rushing on to section 160. ये भी हमने किया हुआ है, right? What does section 160 say? ये तो हमने बहुत डिटेल में कर लिया था 159 ऑलरेडी. 160 क्या बोलता है? The bailee ये भी हमने किया था, जस्ट लिख दे रहा हूं. The bailee needs to deliver goods back to the bailor on the completion of said time or purpose, right? So 160 161 हमने पढ़ा था. But the bailor is also duty bound to receive the goods. उसका मतलब भी यही होता है ना, the bailor is duty bound to receive the goods, right? So if the bailor says no, I'll not receive the goods, and if the delay occurs due to the fault of the bailor, and later on the goods get destroyed, over here is the bailee liable? The answer is an absolute no, because this happened due to the bailor's fault. So is duty bound to receive the goods when the bailee makes an offer to give the goods back. इसको थोड़ा डिटेल में समझना पड़ेगा from the bailor's perspective, right? थोड़ा आगे बढ़ते हुए, let us take up an example over here. Let us first start with an easier example, right? Sir gave the books to XYZ binding company. Book binders are there, I've given it, and the book was to be received on, say, 7th of April, right? So on 7th of April they did their job, and they were giving the book back to me, but I didn't went to receive. I said I have some work, and I kept on delaying. On 10th April a fire broke out at the bookbinders. On 10th April the fire broke out at the bookbinders. Are they liable to pay? The answer is no, they are not liable to pay. Let us take a second example. This is more nice, a more interesting one. Let us say there is one Mr. Ayush. I'm not able to recollect many names, so I have one person that I'm recollecting the name of. So Ayush enters into a contract with railways, right? Ayush wants, Ayush is from where? Ayush is from Kolkata, and he wants that the railways gets his horse from Kolkata to Bangalore, right? So Ayush wants the railway people to get his horse from Kolkata to Bengaluru, and now the problem is the railway people also accepted it. They said no problem, Sarji, we'll do it for you, right? The higher charges were fixed, everything was said and done, and they told that 10th April the horse would be delivered in Bangalore. Ayush wants to ride it over in a horse race program or something, right? Ayush turns up on 14th of April. I don't know what affinity he has for 14th, but he turns up on 14th of April, right? So Ayush turns up on 14th of April to receive the horse. 4 days over here, or rather, यहाँ गिन लो 11th, 10th तक they are fine. 11th, 12th, 13th and 14th, 4 days the railways spend rupees 15,000 on upkeep of the horse. घोड़ा है, ठीक है, अगर डॉग का इतना एक्सपेंस होता है, घोड़ा इतना बड़ा है, तो उसके एक्सपेंडिचर भी जाता होंगे खाने पीने का, अपकीप के, राइट? So for such necessary expenses, or in case if there is extraordinary also, right, this was borne by the railways. Why? Because there was a delay by the bailor in this case. So is the bailee, or is bailee capable of claiming that, or rather we would put it across like that, is bailor duty bound to pay such expenses? The answer is a very big yes. So if the bailee has incurred any detriment due to delay in receiving the goods, . by the bailor, the bailor should compensate the bailee for such expenses, right? एकदम लीगल सी बात हो गई यहाँ भाई. If the bailee has incurred any detriment or loss due to the delay in receiving the goods, by whom? By the bailor, then the bailor should compensate the bailee for such expenses. Very, very clear. Section 160 talks about, yes, on one part it's the duty of the bailee to deliver the goods on time or on completion of purpose, but it is also the duty of the bailor to receive such goods if he has not taken the delivery on time, and if there is some delay due to which the bailee has to bear certain expenses, the bailor is liable, right? So over here the provision is very, very clear, right? And if due to delay later on the goods get destroyed, जैसे हमने first case में देखा था book binding वाले case में, कहाँ गया भाई, then the bailee is not liable to compensate the bailor for anything because the delay happened due to the bailor's fault and the bailee is not responsible. And if due to delay the bailee spend anything extra, the bailor is bound to compensate the bailee for the same. So duties of the bailor, we'll rush through it. Section 150 para 1 talks about disclosure of false gratuitous bailments, right? So if you had knowledge and you did not disclose, very bad, should have done that, so you'll be liable. And if you do not know, obviously you cannot disclose, so case over, you're not liable. 150 para 2 talks about non-gratituous bailment, whether you know or not know. Reed versus Dean was the leading case that we studied under this. Then the liability in case of bailment for reward is on the higher side. So whether you know it or not know it, if there is non-disclosure of false, game over, yes, liability does arise for the bailor. 158 expenses, there are two types of expenses, necessary and extraordinary expenses. So in case of gratuitous, right, in case of gratuitous bailment, what can be claimed? Necessary as well as extraordinary, right? In case of non-gratuitous, that is bailment for reward, we'll quickly recap this. Bailment for reward, right, in that case only extraordinary expenses can be claimed for, because logic says the necessary expenses are covered in the reward, right? That is yani jo aap charges lete ho. 164 talks about defective title. If the bailee is suffering any kind of a loss due to the defective title of the bailor, then the bailor is bound to compensate, right? 159 premature termination, जो हमने पहले भी पढ़ा था. Rights में, yes, the bailor has a right to prematurely terminate the contract, but at the same time is duty bound to compensate the bailee for any loss incurred beyond the benefits so derived from such premature termination of a gratuitous bailment. 159 फिर से मैं चिल्ला चिल्ला के बोल रहा हूँ, premature termination है in case of gratuitous bailment. 160, the bailee needs to deliver the goods back, अच्छी बात है, but the bailor is duty bound to receive the goods, right? So if the bailor fails to receive the goods on time and later on the goods get destroyed, will the bailee compensate for such loss of goods? No, the bailee will not compensate. जिसकी भूल वो भरेगा. हमने पढ़ा था Shaw versus Simmons वाले केस में, if there is a delay due to bailee, right, वो book binding वाला केस था. If there is a delay, obviously the bailee needs to compensate because there was a delay by the bailee. Over here the delay is due to the bailor, hence the bailee will not compensate. और उससे भी बड़ी बात यहाँ जाती है, if due to a delay by the bailor, if the bailee has incurred any detriment or loss, right, because the bailor has delayed taking the delivery of the goods, then the bailor is bound to compensate the bailee for the same. So that ends our list of the rights and duties of the bailor.